Okay, welcome everyone. Sorry about that. Welcome to GLR Learning Tuesdays. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. We invite you to connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. And on LinkedIn, subscribe to us at Campaign for GLR. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect, and the webinar will begin shortly. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. The webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. A link to the recording, as well as any resources and slides shared during the conversation, will be sent to you in a follow-up email to all who registered. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during closing and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. I also want to turn your attention to our upcoming webinars. This coming Thursday on March 30th, we have an exciting session on early math and early literacy with Get to Know Math Talk. That session will occur at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Next week on April 4th, we have two exciting conversations. The first, co-sponsored by the Patterson Foundation. This is a funder-to-funder conversation on digital access and data. How can funders bringing the digital divide use data to drive strategy and impact? That same day, another session co-sponsored by Overdeck Family Foundation is State Investments Taking High Impact Tutoring to Scale. And finally, on April 11th, we'll have another exciting session co-sponsored with Beyond the ESSER Funding Cliff, Local Supports to Sustain High Impact Tutoring. Registration and information for these sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope that you can join us. Joining you now is Hattie Miles-Polka, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Hello to everyone who's joining us today for a conversation that I'm personally very excited to kick off. As part of the GLR community, we have a shared understanding of the importance of building children's reading proficiency by the end of third grade. But a lack of access to affordable, diverse books has undermined this goal for decades. Adding to this urgency are the recent NAEP scores showing that reading and math scores are now at their lowest levels in 2 decades, with the biggest impact on kids growing up in underserved communities who were already struggling. On today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, which is co-sponsored with First Book and the Diverse Books for All Coalition, you'll learn about this coalition, a new consortium of more than 30 nonprofits and member organizations who are taking action together to ensure that more children see themselves and learn about others in the pages of books. This work is important to all of us, and the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is honored to be among the founding members of this coalition. To set the stage, we're delighted to feature Ioma Iruka and Deborah Caldwell-Stone, 2 experts who will talk about why increasing access to diverse books is critical and the need to counteract an environment of book bans and book censorship. Next, our moderator, Renee Blahuda, will moderate a conversation with Ernestine Benedict, Alvin Irby, Chris McGilvery, and Kyle Zimmer. As a reminder, you'll be able to find a link to the complete bios in the chat. I'm now very happy to introduce our first speaker, Ioma Iruka, a research professor in the Department of Public Policy at UNC Chapel Hill. She's also a fellow and is the founding director of the Equity Research Action Coalition with the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute. Ioma, welcome.
Thank you so much, and just so glad to be kicking you all off. I will not be on the stage too long because we have so many amazing speakers here. And again, I want to thank Hattie and the whole entire campaign for inviting me. So I'm just going to share a few remarks. So one is, I just want to tell you, I'm a mother of two young children, a 6-year-old and 9-year-old. And I just remember going to a library, one of the days went to a library, and my son in particular, he's 6 years old, had all these books picked out. He was about to walk out the door, and he sees a book. For some reason, I called his name. Soul. If you guys know the book Soul, from Lupita Nyong'o, is really a rich story about why we need the darkness and lightness. And there's so much you can take away from that book and how we've created a caste system based on phenotype. But it's a reminder that everyone is valuable and that we have to see the value in everyone. And I was just so amazed and just so, I don't know, tickled for some reason that my son picked out that book. And he read it every single day for that whole entire month that we had the book. And so it just reminds us that children have to see a part of who they are in the books that they have. And why is that, right? We are becoming a really diverse country, right? If you look at the 2020 US Census that just happened, right, we can first see that almost 19% of people identified as Hispanic or Latino. That's a number from 15% 10 years ago. A little over 60% are now white, right? That's down from 70% in 2010. The Black population is about 12%. American Indian, Alaska Native is about 1%. The Asian population is growing to about 4 to 5%. And then some other race or two or more races is about almost 18%. So we are becoming a diverse nation that we should really embrace and honor in many ways. And so when you know those sort of like numbers, what does that mean as we think about diverse books, right? One, we have to remember that the early years is a sensitive period of brain development, but also is when language is being formed, emotion regulation, communication, attachment. It is also laying the foundation for self-identity and empathy and cooperation and so much more, right? And so we have to recognize the power of books, particularly diverse books, particularly in a growing diverse country, about how much it matters. And we're so focused on this whole idea of science of reading, all important. But in order for children to really learn, to read to learn, right, that next phase later on in the school years, they have to be able to learn to read. And part of that, for that to happen, is for children to feel exposure to rich materials, print materials. And most of us like to read what we think is interesting to us, right? And so we have to be able to connect to what we're reading in many ways to kind of discover those words, to challenge ourselves, right, in many ways. And I really think about sort of some of the words from Dr. Rudin Sims Bishop, who is emeritus at Ohio State University, right, who talks about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, right? So mirrors are books that reflect different aspects of children's identity, such as their race, their gender, language. And we know that positive racial identity is linked to school engagement and subsequent achievement, right? So mirror is just a way to see yourself, and that's important. But then there's windows, right, that allow children to look through and see other worlds. And we know that exposure to vocabulary, to complex thinking, to new worlds are really essential to continue to sort of promote innovation and those sort of things. And then the other, and I love this from Dr. Bishop, which is the sliding glass door, right? It allows you to enter a whole new world, right? And this is not just for children who are racially or ethnically minoritized, right? It's for all children, right? We want to be able to dream about what is possible, what is impossible. We want to be able to empathize with others, especially if they're not exposed to diverse communities, right? So to me, I want us to think about the role of books for all children, but of course for minoritized children who often don't see themselves in those spaces. And you can see the data from the Cooperative Children's Book Center at University of Wisconsin, and they can say more about the statistics, right? And we know that a lot of books are not written about children of color, right? Black children, Latino children, Native American children, Indigenous children, even, children who are, from Arabia, right? So we don't have a lot of those books. We see the numbers growing, but it's not enough, right? Especially when you look at our census data about the diversity of our community. So as I sort of like leave the stage, I want to have you think about what I call the 3 Ps, right? And the 3 Ps are what I call protection, promotion, and preservation. So the first protection is really about how we protecting our children from harm, from trauma, from adversity. And part of that really requires that children are able to see themselves, their culture, their community represented in what they're reading or seeing, right, from the books to the materials, etc. The more you see yourself, the more you are visible, your experiences, both the good and the bad. right? And so they have to also understand, like children, right? They want to see that they're not the only ones dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And being able to see others through the books allows you to say, you know what, this is only temporary, and that there's solutions to that, right? So how do we protect the sense of self that children have to begin to create, especially in the early years? The second P is promotion, really, and it's really about how we're promoting health and wealth and educational excellence. And we have to remember that books can be such a healing sort of a product, right? A healing, tangible material, right? That enhances, children's social emotional competence. It helps to garner social empathy. It helps you to really think about how do you connect with other people in the world that you're in, right? So when I look at the number of Black, Indigenous, Latina, Asian, Pacific Islander, Arab authors, or even publishers, we are way behind. This we can see from the numbers, right? We know that there are ways to build wealth, and having ownership of intellectual properties like books are really one way in many ways. And finally, we know that educational excellence requires one to be exposed to rich materials and resources. And books are really one of the ways that many early childhood curricula actually comes to life, right? When you think about early childhood curriculum, they're a bunch of words. But a lot of times books are the avenue that allow those words actually come to life and children experience the environment that they're learning in, right? And so if we're teaching science, math, imagine if there were books that talk about how various cultures and communities think about nature, about geometry. This is about exposure, right, in many ways. And finally, preservation. How are we preserving the culture, the vibrancy, the language, the community, the positive racial identity if we don't do that in our books and print materials? And to me, we need to fight against sort of this urge of many leaders, right, who are trying to destroy and silence the brilliance of many of our minoritized and marginalized communities, right? We know this whole idea of banning books and literature around the culture, the pain, the victory, the resistance of many communities it's been done before. And so we have to sort of fight against sort of this burning and banning of books, because we know that reading activates the mind. It creates coalition and resistance to violence and oppression. When you know the brilliance of your people and community, even in the face of oppression, this gives you and children and others additional armor that can never be taken away, right? Because knowledge is power, and we have to give the power of reading, thinking, and resistance through books. We want to preserve our children, our family, and communities. And so really, I leave you with this last quote from Frederick Douglass: once you learn to read, you will be forever free. So please keep that in mind as we continue the conversation and you continue your work.
Thank you so much, Ioma, for sharing your expertise and your wonderful perspective on this issue. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Deborah Caldwell-Stone, the director of the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom and executive director of the Freedom to Read Foundation. Deborah, welcome.
Well, thank you, Hattie, and thank you everyone for making time to be with us today. I truly appreciate it. And as referred to, it's no secret that book censorship is now a constant presence in librarianship, in school libraries, in public libraries across the country. In all kinds of libraries, librarians and library workers are finding that they are on the front lines of the battle over books and ideas and the very lives and identities of their young readers who use those books. Next slide, please. For the past 2 years, we've seen the growing influence of political advocacy groups claiming to advance parents' rights, but engaging in campaigns to ban vast swaths of materials that deal with diverse identities and ideas. These groups have been remarkably successful at organizing campaigns to stigmatize diverse books and materials and inducing school boards, library boards, and elected officials in states and in local or governing bodies like city councils, county governments, to restrict or ban books and reading materials that don't reflect these groups' moral, political, or religious agendas. And the proof of these campaigns to ban books is reflected in these book ban numbers that we've received, reported, and recorded in the Book Challenge Book Database. In 2021, we received a record-breaking 729 reports of groups and individuals demanding the removal of books and other resources from libraries, schools, and universities, demands that targeted 1,597 unique books. In 2022, this all accelerated. Reports to the Office for Intellectual Freedom documented 1,269 demands to censor library books and resources, the highest number of attempted book bans ever since our office began to compile data about book censorship in libraries more than 20 years ago. This nearly doubles the 729 challenges we received last year. And if you see the numbers for past challenges, you can see the increase that we're facing. This record 2,571 unique titles targeted for censorship is a 38% increase from the numbers in 2021. Next slide, please. Now, of those titles, the vast majority were written by or about members of the LGBTQIA community and Black persons, Indigenous persons, and persons of color. And we're not just talking about books that have been in the headline. For example, Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give, Toni Morrison's Beloved, or books books that are really unquestionably suitable for young readers. Biographies intended for primary grades about Ruby Bridges, Rosa Parks, Roberto Clemente. They've all been on the chopping block and challenged in part because of the fact that they're diverse books reflecting the lives and experiences of persons of color, LGBTQ persons. And the use of social media to distribute lists of books compiled by organized groups intent on censorship have contributed significantly to the numbers we saw on the previous slide. The most remarkable numbers that I think are important, that 90% of the challenges last year were attempts to censor multiple titles. That is, it isn't any longer a situation where a parent sees a child reading a book, a student reading a book, looking at that book and having a conversation with a librarian or an educator. What we're seeing are organized campaigns to challenge all kinds of titles based on their genre, on their topic, on the persons who wrote the book, based on the identities of the characters in the books. In fact, 40% of the challenges recorded by the Office for Intellectual Freedom last year in 2022 were challenges that targeted more than 100 titles all at once, indicating that this is truly a partisan campaign, that the individuals aren't even really looking at each book for educational value or usefulness for a particular reader, but challenging these books because they don't fit their agendas. Now, next slide, please. ALA has responded to these campaigns. The first and most important is the public-facing campaign called Unite Against Book Bans, which is intended to mobilize grassroots advocates across the country in their own communities to stand up for the right to read and to access diverse materials in their libraries. Currently, Unite Against Book Bans has more than 65 national partners and numerous state and local partners supporting the campaign, mobilizing their networks in support of the freedom to read. And these partners include educators, publishers, authors, vendors, and organizations supporting civil liberties and civil society. And it's important to note that this is not a campaign just for librarians or even intended for librarians. It's intended for all supporters of the right to read, to choose what one wants to read, what one wants one's own child to read. It's a chance to become informed, to speak up, and to join together. We are actively encouraging everyone to join the campaign, and I invite you to go to the Unite Against Book Bans website now or after the webinar to look at the website and join the campaign. And in fact, that QR code in the bottom left will take you directly to the website. So the groups that are promoting the censorship of books are organized and working together. And this campaign provides a vehicle for us to come together and work together to oppose this censorship. We need to do this to keep diverse books on the library shelf for young readers and readers of all ages. Next slide, please. The campaign offers a toolkit that has materials to help advocates engage with local officials, with the press, and with each other. This nonpartisan campaign is actually based on research that has tested messaging and found messages that resonate with voters and with parents across the political spectrum, regardless of what party they identify with. And I will note that that research found that regardless of political affiliation, voters, all parents indicated, 71% indicated that they oppose censorship as a tool to limit access to books and ideas in schools and libraries. So the campaign includes resources to include engagement in local elections for boards and state officials who make so many of the decisions about what books are available on the shelf. These tools are nonpartisan and issue-oriented. For example, there is a candidate questionnaire and a candidate pledge. But I will note that ALA is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates for election, but we do care about issues, particularly those that challenge our professional values, our support for the freedom to read, the support for the ability of everyone to find books on the shelf that reflect their experiences, their identities, their concerns. And we care about engaging our community so that they are prepared to fully participate in the democratic process, including voting, and voting in every election. But in a time when we are seeing legislation aimed at silencing the voices of LGBTQIA persons and silencing the voices of Black persons, Indigenous persons, persons of color, we do need to be concerned about who is making these decisions and be aware and participate in local elections and for state elections where we can have a real impact on that decision making. And the last resource I will highlight is our white paper called Empowered by Reading. This white paper documents the importance of having diverse reading resources for student achievement and personal growth. It's become an important resource to make the case for diverse materials in library collection and has been used widely when books are challenged and there's a demand to remove diverse materials from libraries. Next slide, please. I'll be brief here because I know our time is short and we're all looking forward to our conversation, but I'd like to highlight some of the direct support that we do provide to librarians and educators dealing with challenged materials in libraries and classrooms. We do provide individualized one-on-one support for those going through challenges. Sometimes we'll engage in public advocacy where that seems to suit the circumstances, and we'll offer guidance on best practices for collection development policies, reconsideration policies that help empower everyone to participate in the decision-making about a book, alert the community that there's a demand for censorship that's been made in the community, and guide the final decision-making in light of the needs of the students and the mission of the library rather than any one political or religious agenda, for example. We also offer librarians going through particularly difficult challenge support through the Merit Humanitarian Fund, and we engage in litigation to defend the right to read with the Freedom to Read Foundation. Of course, our data collection supports the data analysis that we've already discussed, and I encourage you to report censorship. If you hear of any incident at all, please use our challenge reporting form to help us collect this data. And also, we are always happy to hear from folks about trends and news reports that will help us in our campaign to preserve the freedom to read. I'll conclude there and thank you for your time and attention, and hand it back to Hattie to carry the conversation forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Really appreciate your commentary and your shared perspective. So now that we've heard about the importance and the urgency of this issue, I'm excited for you all to hear more about a new initiative launched to act on the research and ensure that young children have access to culturally rich, diverse content, the Diverse Books for All Coalition. Moderating this conversation will be Renee Blahuda, Program Officer at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Renee, welcome to you.
Thanks so much, Hattie, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Yoma and Deborah, very much for framing for us as we get started here why diverse books are so important, and as we're going to talk more about, especially in the very earliest years, and really giving us some insights into the current environment, which is limiting the ability of children to see themselves and their families and their communities in the books that they have access to. So with this context set, we're now going to learn more about, as Hattie just said, the Diverse Books for All Coalition by engaging with 4 panelists who are members of the coalition. And for a little bit of additional context, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation has provided additional funding to support this coalition because its work aligns with the foundation's priorities of advancing racial and educational equity. And so today it's my pleasure to introduce and moderate the panel who will share more about the coalition's work. So here from the Diverse Books for All Coalition today are Kyle Zimmer, the president, CEO, and co-founder of First Book, the organization that's spearheading the Diverse Books for All Coalition. Hi, Kyle. Ernestine Benedict, Chief Communications Officer for 0 to 3. Good to see you. Chris McGilvery, Founder and Executive Director of the Leaders Readers Network. Hi, Chris. And Alvin Irby, Founder and Chief Reading Inspirer of Barbershop Books. Good to see you as well, Alvin. So I'll be posing a few questions to each of the panelists and then asking some questions of the full panel today and having some discussion among all of them. And so for those of you who are attending the session today, as Hattie indicated on the front end, please feel welcome to post your questions at any time. And we'll be working to answer as many of them as possible kind of during the course of the session and then as part of the panel conversation. So let's get started. So Kyle, if we could have you please stay on camera, and the other panelists, if we could have you hop off. And as I mentioned, Kyle, who is the CEO and co-founder of First Book, could we ask you to start us off today by telling us a bit more about First Book and how and why diverse books are important to its mission?
Of course, Renee, thank you so much. The first thing I want to do before I jump into First Book is a round of thank yous, starting with you, Renee. Your personal commitment and the commitment of the Kellogg Foundation has just been extraordinary. We literally would not be here today without your support. So we are just eternally grateful. Another thank you to Ioma and Deborah. You guys, I've heard you speak a number of times, and your leadership and the depth of insight that you bring to this conversation really lights the path for all of us. So we're very, very grateful for your participation. And finally, to my colleagues on the coalition, it's been wonderful to get to know all of you, and even more wonderful to build this together. And there's a lot of great things coming in the future. So thank you, one and all. Very quickly, because I know that we have a clock running today, I just want to give a quick overview of First Book. For those of you who don't know, First Book is a nonprofit organization. We're in our 31st year, and we have been dedicated for all of those years to educational equity. And at the heart of that has been racial and cultural equity. We believe that heart and soul. At the core of First Book is our online community. It's made up of formal and informal educators from every imaginable setting. There are people serving kids from economically challenged communities all over the country, and from Head Starts and Title I schools and libraries and homeless shelters and just a huge array of programs. That community now numbers over 550,000 members, and it's growing fast every single month. Serving that community is really the lifeblood of the organization, and we do that through three primary programs. The first is First Book Research and Insights. And what Research and Insights allows us to do is to listen intently to practitioners, to our community. We run about 30 studies every year on a range of topics with an array of capacities, from broad surveys, targeted surveys, focus groups, all kinds of strategies. And it's allowed us both to refine our own work, but also to work with really visionary corporations like Lego, with curriculum developers and others, and to really bring that voice of the network front and center. The second part of our program is called the First Book Marketplace. And what this is an e-commerce site that provides books and educational resources either for free or at the lowest possible cost. To give you an idea of size, we move between 14 and 16 million books through this system annually. Third and finally is called the First Book Accelerator, through which we give our community access to wonderful experts in a range of topic areas, from race and culture to mental health and more and more. But I know we're running fast, so I just want to say quickly, increasing access to diverse and inclusive books has been the heartbeat of First Book, and increasing over the last 15 years. We launched something called Stories for All about 10 years ago, and we have launched since that time a series of strategies, always with an eye to elevating access to the best and brightest authors and stories from races and cultures that are underrepresented even to this day. So I'll stop talking there, but thanks so much.
No, absolutely appreciate that. And can you talk a bit about how the Diverse Books Coalition was formed, right? That information about First Book was really useful. Like, how and why did the coalition come to be?
Yeah, it a range of reasons. One is we've consistently heard from our own community. One survey, I'll tell you, I think it was just over 90% of respondents reported that the kids they serve would be more engaged readers if the books reflected themselves, their lives, their cultures. And it confirms a lot of what Ioma and Deborah have laid out for us as a rationale for this important work. And the coalition, so that's what drives First Book, is the substance. But the coalition itself was in recognition of the fact that these problems are not getting quieter. They're getting louder and louder. We know that publishers have come a long way in elevating diverse content for the books they offer. But the truth is, the children we represent, the children we are dedicated to, they don't have access to these books. There are too few and they're too expensive. And if we're going to make progress on an issue this important, it's going to require a great big leverage. And when we recognized that and began studying market leverage, well, then we knew that we were going to have to link arms with our colleagues in all these other wonderful coalition members, all these other wonderful organizations, in order to really bring that market strength to bear.
So really helpful, big high-level context, Kyle, and we're going to jump into more of that kind of as we talk in the panel. But before we kind of dig deeper, could you give us a couple of high-level goals of the coalition to set us up, and a couple of details about structure? How is a coalition structured to orient all of us on the session today to the coalition structure?
Well, one of the things that I'm most thrilled about for the coalition is that we have built this together. We came together all of our organizations, and we decided about 3 major goals. And each goal is, around each goal, we've built a working group. And so the first one is collective purchasing. That's to bring that market leverage to bear. The second one is around narrative, to develop and elevate a clear and unified narrative that all of us can use, with data that all of us can use to support the value and importance of diverse content. And the final one is to provide resources and support for parents and caregivers and educators, so that they learn, that we learn together really about how do we incorporate diverse books into programs, into libraries, into outreach, into communities, and in people's homes and lives. So those are the major goals and the major initiatives. But I will say that 30 organizations runs the risk of a diffuse impact, right? And we have really collectively been focused like laser beams on very deliverable, very specific goals. So for example, one primary goal is to double the number of diverse books in the hands of the kids we all serve in the next 5 years. And we are focused on it. We don't want to get lost in the weeds. We want real impact, and we've locked arms, and we're really making great progress.
Thank you so much, Kyle. It's exciting work, and the first 5 months of the coalition has started strong. So thank you so much for starting us off today. I'm going to invite, if I can, Ernestine Benedict to the camera, the Chief Communications Officer from 0 to 3, to kind of take us on the next leg of our journey here about the coalition. And Ernestine, can you talk a bit about how your organization 0 to 3 got involved with the Diverse Books for All Coalition that Kyle was just kind of giving us some more information about?
Sure thing. Thank you, Renee. This is just such an exciting conversation, and I want to thank the campaign for grade level reading for opening the door to this opportunity. While 0 to 3 doesn't directly distribute children's books, we are dedicated day in and day out to promoting the importance of early development for children. And so educating and advocating for parents and all of the care professionals that are in children's lives to integrate diverse books into their lives at their youngest age is deeply embedded in our mission. So it was a no-brainer to get involved with this coalition from that lens. We learned about the coalition from colleagues at other organizations, and we absolutely see the critical need for what Kyle just talked about, to have a collaborative effort of this type right now. So we intend to take our platforms and really provide a megaphone to support this work.
And I believe that you are the chair of the Narrative Working Group, and was hoping that you could share with us a bit about what that group is focused on these days, and kind of why that group's work is so important. You've just kind of given us a preview about why.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know how I got to be a chair of the working group other than getting a little strong-armed by my great colleagues, and I'm so glad they did. This work has been with all the importance that we've talked about earlier. It's also just been incredibly gratifying to connect with so many colleagues from so many different organizations and hear the perspectives. But I am deeply, deeply passionate about the power of narrative as an important tool for social change. And so I felt that I could definitely be a partner in contributing to that. And our group is really, really focused right now on developing a narrative that is aligned across all of the coalition members. The strength of the coalition is not just in our numbers, it's in our shared values, it's in our shared strength and outrage, quite frankly, and sense of urgency about what needs to happen to provide diverse books to all children across this country. And so we know that narratives are especially powerful in changing how people think, what they believe, and ultimately the behaviors and decisions that they take. And so we're writing a new story together, and we are working on really understanding what narratives out there that are countering book bans have been working, have not been working, and really trying to come up with a narrative that transcends just a messaging shift, right? Narratives are not just short term, they're not just single audience focused. We are trying to move hearts and minds to make sure that children have not just the right to read, but the right to read about who they are and other cultures, as Yoma so wonderfully shared earlier. So having that aligned narrative will make it not only clear about why diverse books matter, what we are doing to put those in the hands of kids, but how others can help too. And so we have developed our first, deliverable, if you will, which is a landing page for the coalition called diversebooksforall.org. And I'm certain you'll see that in the chat come up, but please go visit.
Can you say that again? What is that? Where can people find that?
diversebooksforall.org. So that's the official digital home address for the coalition's work. And it is evolving as the work is evolving. So we will be keeping that home address, that digital address, updated with all that we're doing and allowing others to be connected to our work through our newsletter. So we're very excited for everyone on this call, anyone in this work that wants to be connected to what we're doing can go on there today, put in your email address, and we'll make sure that we continue to communicate with you about what our next steps are and how you too can get involved. But having this easy, clear, moving language, a narrative that is for the short term and a tool for change in the long term is what we're focused on. We want that language to be able to lift every voice to support this work.
Thank you. Deep appreciation for your work in leading that working group and participation in it, and for clarity around the why and the what and the short-term, medium-term, long-term impact of that work. So thank you so much, Ernestine. If I could ask Chris McGilvery from the Leaders Readers Network to join the camera. Thank you so much, Chris. Would you be willing to tell us a bit about the Leaders Readers Network and what you and your teachers are kind of seeing, experiencing in the moment? We heard a bit about it in the intro, but from your seats, you know, what are things looking and feeling like?
First, thank you for allowing us to be here today to share more about the Diverse Books for All Coalition. I'm truly grateful to be a part of the coalition. I am the founder and executive director of the Leaders Readers Network. We are a growing and expanding organization that drives improved literacy outcomes. And so we have two projects that are our signature projects. We have our Literacy Fellowship and our Student Ambassador Project, where we get to work with educators, students, and families. Through our Literacy Fellowship, I'll just share this real quickly. We support educators throughout the school year with free professional development, a classroom library that includes books where their students can see themselves in these books and stories. They receive service projects and 4 book distributions for their kids throughout the school year. And then we also work with student ambassadors who adopt classrooms to provide read aloud experiences and brand new books to kids. I want to share 3 stories that highlight the importance of diverse and culturally relevant books. So I'll start off with a student story. Through our Student Ambassador Project, there's one student I'm going to highlight today. She is a 9th grade student who is Asian American and believes in the power of books. Over the last 2 years, she's provided over 500 brand new books to a school. And most recently, in her partnership to adopt this school with brand new books, diverse books where her kids can see themselves, she's been asked, or she's been told that she can no longer come to distribute books because of their library restriction guidelines. The student she's in ninth grade, and she's determined to ensure kids have access to books where they can see themselves. She hasn't let this situation stop her. She's selecting a new school, and so her determination reminds me and my team and the coalition that this is, we need to advocate for our students and families and also our educators. Another story I want to share is one of the teachers that took part of our literacy fellowship. She works at a campus that is 90% economically disadvantaged. Most of her students are African American and Hispanic. We were intentional to look at the demographics and purchase books where her kids could see themselves. 2 years ago, this campus was rated an F, and currently they're doing much better, and we have grown that partnership. However, there are instances where teachers are being faced with book bans and having to scan books or get approval for books. And we need to rely on our teachers to do what they've been trained to do. And so it's so crucial that we are able to support teachers like the one that was able to provide books where her kids could see themselves. And another story, a brief story I'll share at the district level. There's so many small communities that are serving students and families. I recently had a meeting with a district leader in a small rural area in Texas, and majority of her students are Hispanic and Spanish speaking, yet she cannot find high quality books that are not that are embracing their culture and language that includes both English and Spanish. And so there's just a great need to ensure that our students, educators, and families have access to diverse and culturally relevant books.
Thanks so much, Chris, for sharing those stories that talk about different aspects of the work that you all are doing, some of the challenges that you're facing, and then also some of the successes, right, that you have had in the work. And I'm wondering a bit about, you're leading a nonprofit, you're wearing a lot of hats, your time is scarce. Can you talk a bit about why you joined the coalition and like what it's meant for like the work that you're doing so far, right? So like why join this effort when there's so many other competing options out there for you?
I think it's so important that we collaborate together when we're tackling an issue to improve literacy outcomes for historically marginalized communities. We cannot do this work alone, and this issue doesn't belong to just one person. And so over the years, we've partnered with First Book, and we've been able to purchase books at low costs. And when the opportunity came to participate in this coalition and also serve as a co-chair, I saw it as an opportunity to strengthen collaboration among the sector, but also learn from one another. I don't think we all, like each individual knows everything. And if we could just band together and learn and grow together. And so we're at a critical stage of our growth as a nonprofit organization. And this opportunity really is allowing us to learn from this coalition where we're learning about systems and structures and strategies to grow the work that we're doing. We're expanding across Texas, and this work is so critical here and also across the nation. But I'm able to apply the new knowledge and the resources to the work that we're doing to reach more educators, to reach more students and schools. Also, it's built confidence in my own leadership, and I think we all need that. I think, you know, we all wear many hats in the roles that we have today. And when you work with individuals and organizations that are rooting for you and vice versa, it makes you realize uh, you're doing it right, and you're going to keep on growing, and we're going to do this together, and we'll be able to tackle the issue. But ultimately, I think it goes back to those stories, the teachers and students in our schools. Like we need to advocate for diverse books and culturally relevant books where kids can see themselves. This is about ensuring that they can grow today and that our society continues to thrive. And I'm just excited that we're doing this and we're a part of this panel discussion to share more.
Thanks so much, Chris, and appreciate your kind of detailed response about both like giving value, right, to the coalition and receiving value from the coalition so far. So deep appreciation for your work and leadership on that so far. So thank you so much for that. I'd love to ask Alvin, who's the founder and chief reading inspirer at Barbershop Books, to join on camera if I could. Alvin, are you still out there with us?
I am out there. It is, I guess someone has to give me the ability to show. There we go. Start my video.
Yes, it's so good to see you. Good. Welcome back to video. I'm hoping that you could share with us a bit about Barbershop Books, your organization, and why and how diverse books are important to your organization and the families that you serve, to start us off.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Renee. Barbershop Books is a national literacy nonprofit. We have over 200 barbershop partners across more than 50 US cities and 20 states. We create child-friendly reading spaces in barbershops and provide early literacy training to barbers. And that's been our work for most of the past 9 years. During the pandemic, when the barbershops closed, we developed a few kind of digital virtual programming options. One was an e-library, where we actually sourced children's books that were published by independent Black authors. And we made them available for free during the pandemic on our website. And we've been steadily growing that number of diverse titles that are available to families and organizations for free. And then also we developed a reading identity exploration and assessment program called Reading So Lit, which we've been piloting in classrooms, in family shelters, and virtually during the summer directly into the homes of boys of color ages 6 to 8. And so that has been our work over the past almost 10 years. In terms of why diverse books are important, they are critical to the work that we do at Barbershop Books. People ask us all the time, like, how do you go about choosing the books that you put into the barbershops? And it really, for us, is pretty simple. We ask Black boys what they like to read, and then we buy the books that the boys tell us they like to read, and then we distribute those books to our network of barbershops around the country. And one of the interesting things that we find is that the books that adults, whether that be teachers or parents or even barbers, that they sometimes want for the Black boys to read, they don't always line up with what the boys themselves are telling us. And what's been very interesting is that, you know, what we've seen with the Scholastic Kids and Family Reading Report in terms of the preferences that have been expressed by children, which if you go and you look at it, it kind of says that the number one thing that many children look for when choosing a book are books that will make them laugh. And so that's pretty much, you know, been consistent with what we've seen in terms of the recommendations that we get from many Black boys. Their top titles are Captain Underpants, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Fly Guy. And I know that, for a lot of adults, when they look at some of these books, they're like, well, some of these books don't have diverse kids in them. And we certainly, I would say probably over half of our books certainly feature Black boys in them, but we're taking our cues from the boys themselves. And when we get pushback from adults who say, well, you need to have more of this or more of that, we just say, this is what the boys told us. And, I think that, it's really important as we elevate and emphasize the importance of diversity that we also recognize that diversity goes more than skin deep. Diversity is more than hair texture. Diversity is also in the interests that children have. And what we've learned is that there are some Black boys who just want to read about trucks, or they just want to read about nature, or they just want to go on an adventure and discover something new or learn about new people. And guess what? That's okay. Not only is it okay, but I think that part of the work that Barbershop Books is doing with our Reading So Lit program, we're now developing an ed tech platform for this program that will capture strength-based data about the specific content, the specific conditions that children prefer and that they say makes reading personally meaningful, personally relevant, and personally engaging for them. And capturing that strength-based data so that teachers and administrators can make more student-centered decisions about content, about instruction, and about the learning environments that they have. And so, I think that another really important thing as I kind of, wrap up some of the things that I want to say is that as we talk about the diversity of the books, I think it's also important for us to think in a much more inclusive way about the diversity of the readers. The diversifying the pipeline into early childhood education and into education as a whole is a challenge that wasn't created overnight, and it's not going to be solved overnight. And as we work to diversify the pipeline into education, I think that we have to think about what's the low-hanging fruit. There are uncles and aunties, grandmas and grandpas all across this country who, with simply an invitation and a little bit of training and support, would love to come into our classrooms, into our after-school programs to read a book. Why is it important that we also think about the diversity of the readers? Well, I wrote a children's book called Gross Greg about a little Black boy who loves to eat his boogers. And there's a page in the book that says, you call them boogers, Greg calls them delicious little sugars. And on this page, the little sister is holding her nose and she's making this really grossed out face. And when I read this story, one of the things that I say to the children is that it looks like his sister is saying, ugh, Greg, you nasty. And the kids burst out laughing. Why is that? It's because the children can not only relate to what they're seeing on the page, but they also can relate to the way the story is being brought to life. And so I just want to encourage us as we think about diverse books to also make sure that we're thinking in a very intentional way about who's reading those stories and how can we break down barriers so that we can invite them to also share in how children experience diverse books. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you, Alvin. Well said in terms of diversifying who the readers are, the back end, and also, diversity is multifaceted, right? What do the boys want to read? That should lead in terms of choosing the books. I hear you loud and clear, and as a former teacher, yes, I say yes, 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 capital Y, yes. So
I taught kindergarten and first grade. I'm right there with you.
Well said, well said. I think this might be a great kind of transition point, if I may, to invite the whole panel back to the screen. But here's the question I want to pose, and maybe Alvin will just start with you because it's a nice link here to I'd like to pose the question to all the panelists, right? Same question. The Diverse Books for All Coalition launched back in October, right? It's 5 months young, right? And it's 5 months into a 5-year kind of initiative or mandate. And so from your perspective, right, as coalition members, what are you seeing in these early days that you're most excited about, right? As you are participating. So Alvin, if I may just kind of turn it to you first, and then how about if we go Kyle, Ernestine, and then Chris, if we could go in that order, please.
I'm going to start with collaboration. I mean, as the executive director of Barbershop Books, I'm thinking about payroll. I'm working on a lot of those things that it takes to, keep an organization running. And so to have the opportunity to be able to connect on a regular basis with other individuals who are passionate about helping the babies read, I think that alone for me is just such a tremendous opportunity. But I also think the way in which the coalition is structured, the way it's kind of broken into working groups to provide very targeted strategies and approaches to some of the largest challenges that many of the coalition members face, I think it's just so smart. And it provides an opportunity for, I think, organizations like ours that is probably relatively small compared to other organizations to really take on leadership positions and be involved in sitting at the table to kind of have a say in some of these really important decisions that are being made. So I would say those are kind of the things that I'm most excited about. And I'm just so happy to share the screen with all these amazing literacy leaders.
Well, I think maybe not surprisingly, Alvin and I are on exactly the same page. It's always, honestly, Alvin, it's so great to hear you. I think I get excited on 2 levels. One is exactly what Alvin is saying. We have to work together. We have to co-create. We have to co-own. We have to respect each other in the design, in the rollout. And this isn't going to be an easy task. We're taking on something that somebody said this problem has been around for decades. The truth is, it's been around for about 200 years. That's the honest truth. And so there is a lot of work to do. And the only way we're going to do it is by linking arms, by listening to big organizations, to small organizations, and working together. And that is thrilling. The second level that really lights me up is that this problem, this learning to collaborate, is a problem not just in our field, it's a problem for the entire social sector. Our sector is defined by scarcity, and scarcity, whether you're talking about, the animal kingdom or you're talking about the social sector, it turns individuals and institutions who ought to be collaborating into competitors. And what we're learning through this very large scale collaboration and growing is the power of that. And we know that everything we learn can be applied broadly in the social sector to teach other sets of institutions how to collaborate with great impact. So both of those levels, I'm really thrilled.
Wow, I really echo everything that's already been said. And what I'll add is that I'm most excited about the dynamics of the collaboration. There's such a generosity of spirit and time and energy and insights to move this work forward. Let me tell you something. We've gone past Nike. Nike says just do it. We are doing it, right? We are doing it. When I hear the word coalition, and honestly, I go, oh my God, a bunch of meetings. We're going to be talking a lot. And we do talk a lot, right? It's important. But we have shifted in 5 months, Renee, from talking to doing. Unprecedented. And that just fuels me up and excites me.
I mean, I agree with what everyone said. I think I'm excited to celebrate the fact that we're going to get 400,000 diverse books to kids, educators, and families across the nation because of this collaboration. It just shows strength in numbers and working together, but also learning from each other. And so we're going to be able to celebrate so many moments, the small ones, the big ones, and we're going to look back and remember this day. So I am just really grateful to be a part of this coalition and having the opportunity to go to the headquarters First Book and meeting co-chairs and working with so many different organizations. It's just incredible. And I encourage everybody to collaborate and do work together and join us.
Thank you all for your insights. And Ernestine, I think I want to just kind of pick up on a piece that you really put a fine point on of kind of this, it's a group that's doing, not just talking. Both of those pieces are important. And I would say the talking sets stage for good doing, right, as you mentioned. And so I'd open this to the group. What are some of the elements that you think have been really important to kind of set the stage for this productive collaboration that's resulted in the doing, right? And maybe what has made the coalition, sounds like different, right, from some of the other collaborative efforts that you've been a part of, right? It sounds like you've had, good experiences with this so far. So just would open that kind of general question to the panel. Anybody, any takers?
I'll go back to the way in which the working committees are structured. The fact that it was designed from the very beginning to give the coalition members an opportunity to take leadership roles is important, because it's one thing to ask people to kind of just come to the table and listen. It's another thing to say, you know what, I'm going to give you an opportunity to actually be a leader in shaping and driving this work. And so I think that the fact that that was prioritized from the very beginning, and that, they didn't say, well, how many books does your organization distribute? And that's going to be a determining factor for who gets to take leadership positions. But it really was kind of designed with a very kind of collaborative spirit and a very kind of equity-centered lens. I think just kind of sets a really great kind of foundation for the work that makes, I think everybody involved feel like they really are valued and that the work that they're doing is just as important, regardless of what stage, their organization may be at.
I'll jump in and say, I also think there are these are people, across the whole coalition who are dedicating their lives to these causes and related causes. And we know each other, like not at close range, but we know each other. I know about Chris's heroic work. I know about Alvin's heroic work. I've known Ernestine longer than either of us want to do the math on. And, but we haven't gotten to work at close range on something that's so essential, that is on fire right in front of us. And while we're digging in and locking arms, there's also a lot of humor. When we have all gotten together, the chairs got together, the co-chairs got together in Washington. It was deep. It was deeply focused. It was a group of workaholics, and we also had a great time. And so I think it's kind of a wonderful environment, and that too gives me faith in the results.
I'll add one quick thing. Listening and just being there through this process. Like, we're listening to each other and we're seeing each other's strengths, and we're helping each other grow along the way too. So I really appreciate that as we, collaborate and work together.
again, echoing everything that's been said, and I'll just literally tack on to Kyle. I feel like we're mind melding here. We are also learnaholics, thinkaholics. You know, our minds don't shut off. I'm sure many people on this webinar have that same situation where you're constantly thinking about what next, how, who, when, all the variables. And so that generosity of shared thinking and bold thinking is something that has pushed us to, I think, create this collective sense of obligation around follow through for the work. And that speaks to how you shift from just talking about it to really getting it done.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that. Speaking of the how type questions, we've got a couple from the audience, and wanted to ask one of them, if I may, Ernestine, directed kind of to you. And it's a bit about how to develop compelling narrative. And so, we've got a world that is increasingly polarized. There is access to social media 24/7. We are overwhelmed in terms of quantity of information. And so could you share with us a bit, some thoughts about kind of the how piece of developing, compelling narrative, and how that's been approached kind of through the coalition so far, and kind of continuing plans there, and then would invite others if you've got follow-on thoughts there. And then just a preview, we're going to have some additional thoughts about just kind of how, and maybe Kyle, maybe this is going to go to you first, how authors with diverse books in their catalog could support this work. So
I'm really excited by that question. And the first part of the how is respecting the thinking and the work that has come before what we're doing, right? This isn't new work per se. And I think I put something similar in the chat earlier, that we are really learning with and from folks that have been in the trenches on this far beyond when this coalition got together 5 months ago, in individual organizations, and focus specifically on issue areas that touch diverse books, like book bans. So we are learning with and from United Against Book Bans, talking with leaders at Frameworks who are incredible experts, thinking about narrative and framing across myriad issues, but also this issue in particular. Rally, which is a brand communications firm that has been behind movements many of us are familiar with, and others, and thinking through where are there gaps in the current narratives, where are the greatest challenges to current sort of strengths-based and positive narratives. We use words like diversity and perspective and phrases like that Alvin lifted up, like student-centered, in very powerful ways as we have this conversation. But we are literally interrogating each of those to understand it from an oppositional perspective. And where can we bolster, simplify, clarify language, and then the tools? Like, parents and educators don't need another one-pager, right? They need actual, clear, easy, accessible language to say what everyone has been sort of helping to parrot in the chat. We are outraged. This is urgent. Our kids know that they want what they want, as Alvin said earlier. So the first step is listening to the folks that are most impacted by this. We are developing a family advisory group, if you will, to really understand what is important, what are the challenges at a more local level. And Chris has brought some incredible stories that illuminate that. So that listening process is phase one for this narrative work. And then all of those inputs that already exist that bring first person perspective alongside that will be what we put into our sort of mixing bowl, if you will, of new messaging, polished, revitalized messaging along the way in this journey. So it's multi-phased, but step one is that learning from and with what is already before us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Kyle, sort of, I think the next question sort of previewed a little bit, kind of might tee it up to you in terms of authors and kind of ways to connect in to the work.
Yeah, at this moment, we are not, we don't have the bandwidth to manage individual authors and individual titles. What we are doing, though, is working together and to issue major RFPs to the publishing industry. We rolled out our very first one recently, and in those RFPs, we are urging the publishing industry to identify new authors, identify new voices, because we know that that's the power of this kind of collective action, is to incentivize the industry to reach out and to pull in these new voices that all of us, all of us need those new voices in everything we're reading. And so the fastest way, the best way, the most sustainable way to address that need for new voices is through this collective action, collective purchasing, collective market strength. And that will throw the door open to new authors with diverse content, wonderful stories that are based in their cultures that all of us should be enjoying with kids. And so I don't have an instant answer for you on this immediately about how to deal with an independent author, but it's coming. We're prying the doors open. We're working with people in the publishing industry. And the good news is they're moving on it. We got 32 publishers to respond to our RFP. So all the strategies that I'm describing have actually already begun to pay.
So can I ask a kind of related add-on question there? So how do folks, whether they're authors or folks on this call, kind of get involved? How does the GLR community, the networks in general that folks are part of, kind of support this work, right, and become engaged in this moment, right? Let's talk there for a minute, and then if I can, Chris and Alvin, just kind of ask the flip side of that question in a way of like, what is the best way for folks to actually support local work, right, that you all are doing related to this effort as well. So if you could hold there for a second, Chris and Alvin, but Kyle, can we go to you first?
Yeah, of course. So we've only just begun to build this momentum, right? And that we have big needs. And so one big priority for this year is to identify additional funders so that we can grow and expand the impact of this work together. So I urge you, if you're on this call or people or funders, individuals, foundations, corporations who would recognize this as a critical national priority, please make the connection for us. We need that elevated funding to really drive the impact that we're building toward. The second thing is we're trying to grow the coalition. So for those of you who are listening, who represent organizations where this is a priority, represent school districts, individual schools, after-school programs, please reach out to us. Please reach out to us. This coalition is only going to have as much impact as we have growth. And so please reach out to us. I can be reached at kzimmer@firstbook.org quite directly. I'll respond personally to you. It might take me a day. I'm tired, but I'll respond personally to you. And finally, help us identify data. Help us identify those critical stories like Chris shared with us. First Book is running, we're in the midst of conducting a study about the impact of diverse books in the lives of kids and their engagement with books. through our research arm, and that will be available this summer. It's about 500 classrooms, so it's a robust study, and we'll be releasing that and sharing that with everyone. But that's not the only kind of information we need. We need everybody to weigh in, tell us those important local stories, talk to us about national strategies. We're wide open and we want engagement.
Thank you. And encouraging everyone to take that call to action, right? And get involved, tell your story, ask your friends who are funders to fund. Don't forget that part, funder friends who are on the call especially. Yeah. Alvin and Chris, thoughts about what is the best way to support work kind of at the local level?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk from the perspective of barbershop books. When the pandemic happened, I was like, okay, I'm going to make an ebook of my children's book available. And then I reached out to other independent authors of color that I knew. We've partnered with organizations who work with young people to create original children's books. And so if there are independent authors of color who have written quality children's books, who may have those books sitting in their emails or Google Docs collecting digital dust, but believe that they can be out in the world making an impact and inspiring children, reach out to Barbershop Books and submit your ebook. We will review every single submission, and we make a really good effort to try and get those out. Right now, reading Barbershop Books is building an ed tech platform that is going to help children explore their reading preferences and their reading identity. It's going to capture strength-based reading data about the specific content and the specific conditions that make reading personally meaningful for children. And so if you're in a school district, you're in a library system, you're in an organization where you're like, where do our kids like to read? What are the different kinds of conditions that actually make reading fun and engaging for them? We're looking right now for school district partners and for other organizations who want to begin to capture this information in a standardized way. Those are two kind of very barbershop book specific ways that people can get involved with us. But one of the things that I would say is turn the everyday environments and moments of children's lives into opportunities to read and learn. Not every parent has the bandwidth of the time to kind of block out a scheduled time every single week or day. And so encourage, the families and the children and the educators you work with to turn those trips to the grocery store, those trips to the post office, those commuting trips on the bus or the subway or wherever or however you commute into opportunities to read and learn. And so those would be, just some of my things as we work to get more books out there.
Thanks so much. And Chris, we're going to turn to you, and do not panic. There's a poll that's popped up on your screen. Please, take a minute to offer some feedback if you would like, but we still have time together. Again, do not panic. Chris, go.
I was going to read that first, but then
Yeah.
I'll wait. I think at the local level, we're based in Texas and we're partnering with educators, students, and families across the state. We need as much support as possible to help our educators and students and families to have access to diverse and culturally relevant books. Over 50%, and that number is growing, of our student population is Hispanic. And it's important that our kids have access to books where they can see themselves, embrace their culture. We need foundations to trust and support educators through this process of giving access to books. We need them to fund book access. We need corporations to partner with us as well to fund book access and support our programming. So I invite anyone that's participating on this webinar, if you know of an educator in Texas, encourage them to apply for the Literacy Fellowship. If you know students in Texas and across the nation that want to adopt a classroom and provide these resources, encourage them to apply to our Student Ambassador Project. And we can collaborate and partner together. But most importantly, I think it's really funding that book access. Our kids deserve it. And I'm just really grateful to do this work with you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Again, resourcing, right? Students and places where they can read, where they already do read with these materials, super, super crucial. Appreciation for that. Deborah, I see you on camera. I'm hoping I can draw on your expertise for a moment here. We've got a bunch of questions that have come in about kind of who is making book ban requests, kind of where in the country, if you could give some kind of specifics about that, if you've got that, and like to whom. People are real curious about like who's actually getting the request. And I know you previewed some of that in the introductory comments. And then if I could just kind of add on the back end of that, would love your thoughts on just kind of the benefits of coordinated responses instead of one-off responses to these types of requests and just these censorship efforts, right? So it's a lot, but I know you're in it knee deep every day, so I'm confident.
So we're getting reports of challenges brought from to be fair, we're still getting challenges from an individual parent who's concerned about a book their child is reading. But those numbers have been dwarfed by this coordinated campaign by groups like Moms for Liberty, No Left Turn in Education, Parents Defending Education. They've activated local chapters, and members of those chapters go to library boards and school board meetings with a list of books. Often they've pulled this from social media. They have coordination through closed Facebook groups to plan their strategy to remove these books, particularly diverse books, from schools and libraries. And it's everywhere. I would like to say that it's limited to certainly we have hotspots in certain parts of the country. Florida and Texas come to mind first, but I will tell you there are chapters of these groups in all 50 states, and we're getting challenges in every community, every state, in some places that you would never expect it. Places that you would think are traditionally in support of diverse educational resources, diverse books, we're getting challenges demanding the removal of LGBTQIA books or books that, like the 1619 Project or The Hate U Give. So I would say that you have to be aware, because it can be happening in your community. You have to pay attention. I'm actually thinking about the fact that right now in suburban Chicago, Northern Illinois, a stronghold for what you might call progressive politics, we have at least 4 elections where there's an attempt to replace school board members and library board members who are intent on serving the entire community and having the libraries reflect everyone's lives and experiences in the collection, replaced with board members with a particular agenda to remove books from libraries. So just pay attention. And who's getting these challenges? First of all, library boards, school boards, targeting the school library in particular, but often targeting curriculum. And so that's where we see the legislation come in. We have 27 states have some kind of legislation that's intended to prevent access to books that reflect the lives and experiences of marginalized communities. Sometimes openly saying that books dealing with the lives and experiences of LGBTQ persons simply don't belong in the hands of minors, to using the discredited information about so-called critical race theory to keep books about the history of racism in the United States out of the hands of young readers as well. And this requires, to fight this, we have to come together. We're all in this together. I've heard so much wonderful things about the power of the Diverse Books Coalition, and it's the same thing. Given these political activities, given the targeting of local elections and local boards, and right down to the fact that we're seeing direct threats made against educators and librarians on social media, it's incumbent on all of us to stand together and find the means to speak up and engage. It means paying attention. It means going to board meetings. It means reaching out to our networks, our neighbors, our churches, to our community groups, our colleagues at work and everywhere, to come together to fight this. And we know that those numbers are there from the polling that's been done, but a platform like United Against Book Bans provides the tools for everyone to become engaged in this fight to preserve the right to have diverse books on the library shelf. And,
Thank you.
you know, yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry, Deborah. Thank you so much for getting into the weeds with us on those questions and for the work that you all are doing on that front. And I think, you know, what you're sharing here and what coalition members have shared kind of brings us, I think, nicely around back to the beginning and Yoma's comments about the power of these efforts to protect, to promote, and to preserve, right? The 3 Ps of this work that benefit children and families and communities and all of us, quite frankly, as we live together, in community. So I really just want to offer deep appreciation to our panelists today for participating and sharing more about their work together on the Diverse Books for All Coalition, to the producers, the moderators of this effort today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Hattie, if I may.
Thank you so much, Renee, for moderating, and thank you to every single one of the speakers today. What an informative and galvanizing conversation it's been. Thank you again to everybody who joined us as an attendee for this conversation, for your wonderful engagement in the chat and in the Q&A and the poll. It's just been such a great session. Once again, you can see on your screens here our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars, which you can register for. Really, thanks again. It's been a really wonderful session, and we'll see everybody next week at our next webinar. Thank you all.